Welcome to the Fear and Greed Afternoon Report for Friday, the 24th of June, 2022. I'm Sean Aylmer. Every afternoon, we bring you the 5 news items that happened today that you need to know about. Let's jump into it. Story number 1, the S&P ASX 200 ended the week up 0.8% today to 6,579 points and was 1.6% higher for the week. Tech stocks rallied hard following a strong lead from Wall Street. CSL, Wesfarmers, Telstra, Woolworths, Coles, Aristocrat Leisure and Goodman Group all did well. The banks were mixed. The biggest laggard on the index today were the energy companies after oil prices fell further. What I loved about today, though, was the performance of some of the most sold-off stocks on the bourse. Tracking group Life 360 jumped 25%. Buy now, pay later operator Zipco was up 22%. Biotech Imugene rose 18%. Data connectivity player Megaport closed up 16%. And battery group Novonix rose 13%. I suppose when you've been sold off so much, those sorts of jumps aren't surprising. Still, it was good to see some positive news, at least for their shareholders. It's also been a very big week for bonds. Yields fell sharply on 3 and 10-year bonds today, and this week has been the strongest for bonds in about a decade. Bonds get confusing, so stay with me here. Bond payments are fixed. Hence, when the price of a bond is bid up and payments stay the same, the return or yield falls. Bond prices are bid up when investors are looking for safety. So bad economic news pushes up the price of bonds and yields fall. Lesson over. Story number 2. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will fly to Europe on Sunday for a NATO leaders summit in Madrid before heading to Paris to meet French President Emmanuel Macron. The Prime Minister said the NATO summit came at a critical time with the war in Ukraine carrying consequences that reached far beyond Europe. While Australia is not a member of the organisation comprised of 30 nations, it is the largest non-NATO contributor to Ukraine in terms of military aid. Mr Albanese said he was pleased to accept the invite from Mr Macron, who famously called former Prime Minister Scott Morrison a liar. Mr Albanese described France as an important partner. Story number 3. The energy market operator lifted the suspension of the national electricity market this afternoon after an increase in the availability of power stations and a reduced risk of power shortages. But that's not really the end of the story. The third largest generator in the country, Energy Australia, suffered an unexpected outage at its Mount Piper coal power station in New South Wales today, with media reports suggesting about 600 megawatts suddenly went offline, with gas and coal prices still high and some coal plants still offline. There's a way to go in this story yet. Story number 4, Qantas Chief Executive Officer Alan Joyce said passengers need to get used to higher ticket prices and more crowded planes because of higher fuel prices. Announcing new direct flights from Perth to Johannesburg and Jakarta, Mr Joyce said his airline's yearly fuel bill exceeded $4 billion, and the company was cutting capacity across Qantas and Jetstar by about 10% because of oil prices. The company's fuel bill will be $1.7 billion higher next year than pre-COVID-19 levels. Hence, airfares are on the way up. And finally, story number 5, the US Senate passed a modest package of gun reform this morning, even as the Supreme Court, that's the highest court in the land, ruled that Americans have a constitutional right to carry handguns in public for self-defense. It really was one of those days that shows the two sides of the gun debate in the US. The broadly bipartisan Senate bill is the first significant gun legislation in more than 3 decades. President Joe Biden said the legislation will help protect Americans and kids in schools will be safer. It's modest, with the most extravagant rule being greater background checks for would-be gun purchasers convicted of domestic violence or significant crimes as juveniles. That's it for the afternoon report for Friday, the 24th of June, 2022. Don't forget to hit follow on the podcast and find Fear and Greed on LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook. Join Michael Thompson and I tomorrow morning for the weekend Fast 5 by Fear and Greed. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your evening.